Well, we finally know the name of the new Spider-Man movie being produced by Marvel Studios and Disney. Or do we? Is it Spider-Man Homepage, Spider-Man Home Office, Spider-Man Homebrew, Spider-Man Home Fry, Spider-Man Homebuyer, Hometown, Homefront, Mobile Home, Home Base, Home Plate, Hit Home, Mental Home? I don't know. It's one of these. We've got a bunch of new titles posted by people associated with the movie in sort of an advertising blitz promoting the new film. But this video isn't really about that. This video is about what I would do, personally, if I were to make the next Spider-Man film, because you are all very interested in that. First of all, my movie would be called Spider-Man Go Home. Now, this could be seen one of two ways. It could just be seen as, Go Home being the title, or it could be seen as Spider-Man, Go Home, like, boo, Spider-Man, we hate you, go home. And the reason for that will be clear as I lay it out. Now, keep in mind this is sort of a tongue-in-cheek title. It's not like I necessarily think this is something Marvel would actually do. It's just my idea of something I would like to see and something I would make. This is going to contain spoilers for Spider-Man Far From Home. So if you don't want any of those, skip to the end of the video and don't watch it. Following the events of Spider-Man Far From Home, we see that J. Jonah Jameson has been successful in spreading the information that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. Basically, everyone in the world knows. However, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Jameson is like an Alex Jones type figure. There are people who believe him, but then there are a lot more people who don't. They think he's a whack job, a crackpot. People think the glitchy, jumping footage where Mysterio released Spider-Man's identity may have been edited, which is funny because if you watch the movie, it was edited. But yeah. The movie opens with Peter Parker about to give a press conference to address the claims. He's under heavy security. There are people who want him dead, and there are people who want to have his baby. It's a mixed bag of crazy people who love and hate him in equal measure, and they're all too hyped up for comfort. The crowd is raucous and wild, and a riot might break out at any moment. As Peter takes the podium and begins to speak, the microphone screeches as he taps it. A classic gag. He steps up, starts to talk. The microphone goes off. Or does it? The sound turns out to not be from the microphone. A costumed supervillain emerges from the parting crowd as they hold their ears against the screeching noise that he's creating. The costumed villain announces himself as Squelch, the Sound Slayer, and says that he's here to kill Spider-Man. This character, Squelch, would be a new character created specifically for the movie, and you'll see why in a moment. Peter Parker cowers in fear as Squelch approaches him, throwing the security agents aside with guitar riff sound blasts. He's a sound-based villain. You get it? Like he creates loud sounds. Anyway, suddenly Spider-Man swings in and is immediately killed by Squelch. Just like that. Dead. Squelch declares victory and rockets off into the sky with a sonic boom. Paramedics rush in, and one of them loudly and frantically calls out, "He's dead! Spider-Man is dead!" As the crowd disperses and police arrive, we see that Peter is being rushed away by security. Backstage, Nick Fury and the other S.H.I.E.L.D. agents gather, and we see that both the fake Spider-Man and Squelch were actually S.H.I.E.L.D. agents. The whole thing was staged to give the media evidence Peter isn't really Spider-Man. In other words, showing two of them in the same place at the same time. Peter is obviously downtrodden and sad that Spider-Man as a concept is now dead. But Nick Fury assures him that it's better to lose a trademark than his life. He tosses out the idea that Peter can always just rebrand himself. Meanwhile, J. Jonah Jameson, in his secluded studio, isn't convinced at all. In fact, he's infuriated by the fact even more people think he's the lying crackpot than they did before. Jameson is steadfast in believing that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, and he cannot be dissuaded. Jameson secretly offers a bounty on Spider-Man, enlisting one of his employees to reach out on the dark web and make it known that there's a price on the head of both Spidey and Peter Parker. Payment goes out to whomever can bring in Spider-Man and prove that he's Peter Parker, by whatever means necessary. This brings in our three main villains. Yes, three. We're going to make the Spider-Man 3 mistake of having way too many villains in our movie, but hopefully it'll work out. The first villain is Smythe, a tech genius who is itching to prove he's the next great roboticist. He uses his insane killing machines to remotely search out and scan for Peter Parker, dubbing the newest versions of his robots the Spider Slayers. This is directly from the comics, but you probably could assume that. The bounty offered by Jameson would help Smythe cover the costs of his work, since he's new at this and at risk of losing his business due to a lack of paying contracts. He's basically in serious trouble with his business and needs to do whatever he can to try to get good. Second, we have Kraven the Hunter. He loves the thrill of the hunt, and the idea of tracking and killing a superhero is appealing to him. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Kraven would be a wealthy southern businessman who travels the world hunting big game, usually illegally. Despite his status, Kraven is a legitimately good hunter and a terribly scary individual. Picture American Psycho meets The Hills Have Eyes. He wants to turn Spider-Man in not for the money, but for the bragging rights. Last, we have the Punisher. This would be how Frank Castle would be introduced to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, just as he was introduced as a villain in the old Spider-Man comics. The Punisher wants Spider-Man dead for killing Mysterio, and sees him as nothing more than just another murderer running the streets. The bounty would also help him buy more guns and ammo for his deranged cause. During all of this, Peter Parker is trying out new superhero identities. He does so by designing and producing various costumes based on random themes his friends think are cool. We would get fun scenes of each side character describing what kind of hero they think would be good, and Peter would react with uncertainty or enthusiasm for each idea. Peter even has a plan B in the works, the virtual nanite mesh. He has a computer working on processes to design a new type of nanite similar to the nano Iron Man suit, but with more advanced properties. Each pitch-black nanite would actually be holographic in nature, sort of 3D printed from particles. This way, the nanites themselves could self-produce and print new nanites if the suit is damaged. Essentially, the suit could never be damaged for long as it would replicate its own parts. The computer is still working on equations and production processes, so the option is off the table for now. The new identities that Peter Parker and his friends come up with would be from an actual comic book event where Spider-Man changed his identity multiple times. The names and personas he took in the comics included Prodigy, Ricochet, Dusk, and Hornet. Throughout the movie, faults are found with each new identity. Dusk is too disturbing and brings back Night Monkey vibes, scaring the hell out of everyone. Ricochet seems to work out well, until his projectiles ricochet into unintended people, including himself. Peter would burn through each new identity as the Punisher, Kraven, and the Spider Slayer robots continue to cause havoc whenever they find Peter Parker. Eventually, it becomes clear that he can have no rest from the accusations and constant persecution. Peter knows it, his family and friends know it, and S.H.I.E.L.D. knows it. He's given a new identity and is about to be relocated for the safety of himself and everyone around him. Peter is very hard-pressed to go. He doesn't want to leave, obviously. He doesn't want to start a new life and be somebody else. He's aboard that neat, futuristic plane from Far From Home, the one with the suit printer, when he ultimately decides that he's not okay with being flown away from the problem. Peter is struggling with himself. Emotions are tense. Right as he looks up with an expression of resolve and focus, we hear a sound effect. The computer just so happens to be done processing the virtual nanite mesh. Perfect timing. Peter decides that he's going to stop his enemies or die trying. Either he'll succeed or he'll be dead. Either way, the hunt will stop and everyone around him will be safe. He releases the nanites and allows them to swarm him as the whole room turns an inky black. High-octane action scenes follow. Spider-Man, now wearing a black nanite version of his old costume, reappears. He seems a bit more muscular, bigger, but it's only barely noticeable. As he boldly swings through the city, Spider-Man is met only with the cheers of appreciation and wonder. Seeing him alive again seems to have washed away any question of bad sentiment throughout the city. At the beginning of the film, everyone saw that Spider-Man wasn't really Peter Parker, supposedly, so now there's no more concern over what he did to Mysterio. They believe the video was obviously faked. We would be treated to fun action scenes, with Spider-Man trashing the Spider Slayer robots throughout the city, with themes of a kaiju battle. The robots would replay old footage of J. Jonah Jameson on their screens, spitting vile hatred at Spidey in an attempt to discourage him. And, of course, this is something that actually happened in the old comics, but moving on. As Spider-Man is victorious over the robots and has beaten them all, we see Smythe in his office, calmly watching over everything. He sees his property destroyed and checks his bank balance to see that he's fast approaching bankruptcy. Very calmly, Smythe orders a nearby robot to his side and says, "Run order 33.2. The robot rises up, lifting its arms as if it's about to squash Smythe, who says, "No mess, please?" To which the robot reacts by standing down and taking a less violent punching stance. We cut away from that darkly comedic note before Smythe is actually killed by his own robot. Seemingly weakened by the fight with the Spider Slayers, Spider-Man stumbles, his nanite suit barely stopping his fall by grappling onto a nearby lamppost. Kraven watches from the shadows like a skulking tiger and sees his chance to strike. As soon as Kraven approaches, Spider-Man instantly drops the act. He wasn't feeling weak at all. He remarks that he knew Kraven was a sucker for an easy kill and that it would draw him in. A knockdown, drag-out fight would ensue, with Kraven using high-tech skinning knives and the best hyper-advanced blade money can buy. They seem kind of effective against Spider-Man's new, more fluid and flexible nanosuit, but ultimately they aren't doing the job. Kraven seems to gain an upper hand as he buries Spider-Man in debris, mimicking the classic scene in which he buried Spider-Man in a grave, but then he hears rumbling before Spider-Man bursts from the ground in a totally different location, black tendrils effortlessly spreading a cloud of rubble and dirt. In a hail of stone that could easily kill a man, Spider-Man knocks out Kraven and sends him flying. Is Kraven dead? Who knows? It seems as if Spidey is getting a little loose with his moral code, but then again, these people were hunting him and his loved ones. Boom! A gunshot rings out. Spider-Man is hit square between the eyes and stumbles back for a moment before the nanosuit spits the crushed bullet out into his open hand. Spider-Man looks up to see a sniper on the roof. The Punisher. Now, at this point, the audience would probably think this fight would be easy. An amped-up supersuit Spider-Man versus Frank Castle, a guy with a gun. However, as the two fight, the Punisher is eerily calm. He allows one of Spider-Man's nano-tendrils to grasp his forearm, only to pull the line taut and cut it off with a machete. When Spidey lunges at the Punisher, he opens up on Spider-Man's chest with a tear gas launcher, wedging the canister into the suit like the spent bullet that was previously spit out. The ensuing gas surrounds Spidey, who frantically pulls the canister from his chest and crushes it. It becomes obvious that while the Punisher is physically outmatched, he definitely has the upper hand when it comes to calm and rational thought. His tactics are going to be hard to beat. When Spider-Man charges the Punisher, he simply presses a button, detonating a previously placed explosive that sends Spidey flying off the roof. This man is prepared. For lack of a better term, Frank Castle is the Batman of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The battle goes on, and we're all waiting for that moment when Spider-Man finally turns the fight around and starts winning. But that moment never comes. Spider-Man is defeated. Truly defeated. The Punisher approaches him, victorious, and pulls off Spider-Man's mask. Underneath the mask is J. Jonah Jameson. The Punisher is shocked. Jameson frantically begs not to be killed and explains that he just wanted to become the new Spider-Man, to be better than the original, and he set up the bounty against himself to show the world that he was the superior superhero and could take on anyone. The Punisher is so confounded by this development that Jameson is able to desperately lash out at him and get away. As Jameson flees into an alley and far from the scene of the fight, he stops running, stops limping, and regains his composure easily. Once again, he was never hurt. He was never defeated. It was all a show. J. Jonah Jameson's face distorts and retracts. It was the nanite mesh simulating his face all along. Peter Parker was actually still in the suit. I hope they have fun sorting that out, Peter remarks coldly, as his suit converts to resemble normal clothing and he disappears into the crowd. Final scene. Nick Fury appears out of nowhere, as per usual, while Peter Parker is putting away the nanite mesh suit. It appears as if he's having a bit of trouble getting the nanites off of his skin as he places the suit back into a containment shell. Nick begins chewing out Peter for not leaving and going into hiding like he was supposed to, for blowing S.H.I.E.L.D. resources, including their whole plan to make it appear that Spider-Man was dead. Peter isn't taking any guff from Fury, however, and sasses back at him. When Nick approaches and takes an imposing stance in the argument, the black goop actually lashes out from its container, causing Fury to step back. "I'm just a little bit concerned, is all," says Fury, as he comedically backtracks and shows some out-of-character humility due to what he's seeing. "I thought you were done with the Spider-Man thing, and now you're right back at it. I mean, what happened to creating a new identity?" "I have," Peter replies, his back turned to Fury. "We have." We see a close shot of Peter's face as black nanite particles swirl in his eyes. The machines are inside of him. He adds, "We are Venom." Roll credits. After the credits, we'd be treated to a scene where J. Jonah Jameson gets a call from his secretary. She says that someone is there and wants to meet with him, but Jameson says he's busy and it can wait. We would then cut to the secretary at her desk outside of the office, and pan slowly over to see the Punisher, covered in weapons, sitting in a waiting room chair and leafing through a copy of Guns and Ammo. So yeah, that's how I would do a Spider-Man movie. I prefer to keep things semi-grounded, like the original 1980s Batman movie, like the first Iron Man movie. You know, just keep things relatively simple as opposed to aliens shooting a big blue laser into the sky and opening up billions of universes or whatever the fuck. I like to keep things, you know, down and dirty and gritty, where a hero just fights for his life against a bunch of bad people. That's just me. So yeah, let me know what you think in the comments below about Spider-Man Go Home, my dumb little idea for a Spider-Man movie. And I guess all of us will have to wait and see what Marvel actually has in store for us when we all go to theaters to see Spider-Man Home Theater, Home Alone, Spider-Man Group Home, Spider-Man Home Game, Spider-Man Home Improvement,